This is Larry London, and we welcome you to a very special edition of Border Crossings. Today, I am joined by a music superstar, and I don't get to say that often, but this particular guest is definitely an icon, a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Songwriters Hall of Fame. We welcome the founding member of one of everybody's favorite bands all around the world, Neal Schon from Journey. Welcome, Neal.
How you doing, Larry?
Thanks. I am great. It's great to have you on the show. Where are we talking right now? I see a home studio, the Platinum Records. Where are you?
This is just my little office workspace with a computer crammed in it now. You know, we're at home, and I work downstairs. I got a little studio down there that I write in.
Mm-hmm.
We spend.
You still live in San Francisco?
North of San Francisco, Marin County.
Wow. Well, this whole thing began for you. I guess, you were 10 when you picked up the guitar for the first time, I read, and you have parents who are big band musicians who kind of inspired you to choose a musical path.
Yeah, I was weaned around music ever since I was a child. And, the earliest times that I recall, before I even started playing, we were living in New Jersey and Trenton at the time, and we had relocated, from I was born in an Air Force base in Oklahoma. My father was, a big band leader. My mother was a singer in the band. That's how they met. Then I was, a sparkle in his eye and twinkle in his eye. And I was born, they got out of the Air Force and moved to New Jersey. And I recall, growing up there, and my dad would have rehearsals with very small, band. He didn't have the full band because we had a small house. And they would rehearse on weekends there. And, they do a lot of standards, the Count Basie was doing, it was Basie, Ellis Fitzgerald, all the classic old standard guys. And he took me to see a lot of those guys as well. So, it just time after time, the music was kind of embedded in my, head and heart, and didn't know that yet. And, I started messing around with the piano when I was very young. Never really took any lessons, never really connected totally with it. And then he started teaching me woodwind instruments, and I played woodwind instruments for a few years until I discovered the twang of the guitar. It was really probably the Beatles. When I heard the Beatles, first, and I heard that sound, I was like, wow, what is that? I kind of want to know about that.
Wow. And then, of course, along comes Bad English, Santana, and then even Eric Clapton calls you and says, come and join Derek and the Dominoes. And you say, no, I'm not, I picked Santana over that. I was playing around in the Bay Area with a local group that was pretty big at the time. First real band that I was in. They were much older guys, and they were pretty known in San Mateo, down in the peninsula, and I was playing in a club down there. And the bass player, his nickname was 9 Year, his real name Bob Woodridge, knew Greg Raleigh and Michael Shreve from Santana Band. And so he invited them down to come check us out. And I guess they had heard, he told them about me, and I was a kid at the time, 15, I guess. And illegally in the club, and the club owners were really cool to let me play, and I had to get in and out, On this one particular night, we played down at a club in the peninsula in Palo Alto called the Poppycock, and they came. And after, the set was over, the club owner agreed to close down the club after everybody left. And we hung out to the wee hours of the morning jamming. And that became the beginning of my relationship with Greg Raleigh and Michael Shreve. And then soon after that, the rest of the Santana Band. And so it started like that. And Greg started picking me up at high school. I started cutting school and going to jam with him at his father's. His father had an apartment in Belmont, and it had a piano in it. So I brought a little amp, and we'd go and we'd jam, for hours, just him and I. Then they were working on their album at the time. They were finishing Abraxas, which was the second Santana album. and they invited me down to the studio just to hang. It was really, nothing was being talked about like I was going to be a member or anything like that. They just, I think they appreciated that I appreciated good music, and I loved what they were doing, and they were sort of giving me an insight of what it would be like to hang out in the studio with a bigger band. It has been very successful, and trying to put some training wheels on me, and so my original manager, was then doing a lot of the different things for Santana. It was Herbie Herbert, and he was doing, he was Carlos's guitar tech at that time. He was also managing the band because it was a very dysfunctional manager at that time who had drug issues. And he was kind of like doing everything. The more I saw, if they were playing a live show, he'd be out the front doing front house mix. Then he'd jump up on stage and he'd do the monitor mix. Then he'd go back to Carlos and make sure he didn't bust a string and everything was working. And so, I met Herbie back then, and they set me up in a room off to the side, much like I used to practice in my folks' apartment. And I had a little phonograph, my dad had a bigger stereo downstairs, and I would take a Fender Twin, and because we're in an apartment, I'm supposed to keep it quiet. I'd turn it face down to the floor, so the speaker's facing the floor, and I put pillows over the back, and I'd crank it to 10. Then I'd stick a wah-wah in front of it, so I could get some high end out of it, because when you face it down, all the high end goes away. And actually, it worked really well back in those days for me to be able to play along with records and learn from the albums, which is really how I learned how to play, was, emulating people I was listening to. Mm-hmm. And, it started out with great blues artists like B.B. King and Albert King. And I was a huge fan of Michael Bloomfield, with Electric Flag and Paul Butterfield before that. Mm-hmm. Then I started, venturing off, and I was listening to, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, the old stuff where everything came from. And I was moved by the blues. I understood the blues. I don't know why, but it just, grabbed a hold of me. And I really kind of, once I started digging into it, I understood the vibe of it, and how you have to put some hurt into a note, to make it mean anything. And one note means a million notes if you play it in the right place with the right phrasing. So then I started, being from a musical background. I had a lot of horn players, that I loved. Miles Davis was one of them. My dad loved Stan Getz. Stan Getz was a great sax player, but it was a little mellow for me at the time. And so I was more drawn to what Miles was doing with like Coltrane and that kind of more obscure jazz. The further they went off into that thing, into that style like Bitches Brew and all that, I was more into it than ever. But I loved, jazz guitars too. I studied, a lot of John McLaughlin. He's still one of my favorite of all time. He's one of the greatest guitarists in the world still to this day. Many, many different guitarists and singers. I studied singers, started listening to a lot of soul singers. I had a lot of blues and R&B and soul in my background for what I listened to. And I loved Curtis Mayfield. I loved Aretha Franklin. I loved James Brown, for funk. I loved Sly and the Family Stone. And so that, actually, after I played with Santana, there was, a duration. We did Santana 3 album, which was an exciting album for me as my first professional album to ever play on. And I got featured on it quite a lot, on any more, they've repackaged it so many times. So people that know my playing can differentiate who is Carlos and who is me on that album. But, I got featured actually on the song that went to be like #1, Everybody's Everything, that featured Tower of Power. Mm-hmm. That particular song, Carlos was playing bass at the time in the studio. And then he went back and he played rhythm. And they said, you go play lead, after they cut the track. And so I just went out, and the Tower of Power guys, I remember they were in the studio with us at Columbia Records on Folsom Street in San Francisco. And I went out and I just kind of wailed a wah-wah solo like I'd practiced for many years. I used a wah-wah back in those days, not to go wah, 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 like many people did, or like wasn't in a funky type way like Curtis Mayfield did, or many of the R&B artists. I kind of used it as a filter to cut through the track, because in Santana there was a lot going on. You had Chapito Arez on timbales, who was like a storm all into himself. And you had Michael Shreve on drums and Michael Carabello on congas, and that rhythm section was just unstoppable once it got going, and it made quite a racket. And so to have a slot in there after you put organ and Carlos and David Brown on it, man, you had to I had to kind of tailor my sound to fit into that, to even find a slot. And that's what I did. And then we did, our second record, Caravanserai, which was, for some of us was not the direction. I loved the record, but, a lot of the guys, Greg, it was not really what he wanted to do. That band, as it was, disbanded at that point after we finished Caravanserai. So Herbie Herbert, long story short, I'm trying to shorten this up a bit. I didn't know what I wanted to do at that time. And so I was playing with Greg Arico, the drummer from Sly and Family Stone, and Larry Graham, the original bass player. And we were jamming at Greg's house, and I thought we were going to do this power funk trio, which was really pretty ass-kicking. It was like really ahead of time. And what was really interesting about it is it had, I was bringing all my influences into it, which were like, at that time, I had already gone through all the cast that came over from, the UK, Clapton and Hendrix and Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page, who were taking the black blues and, created their electric version of that. And I was kind of like a Cajun soup of all that. I kind of threw in all my favorite players and kind of became that until I came up with my own style, so we were doing kind of like a heavy funk rock trio. And Larry Graham was singing lead vocals in his baritone voice, which I thought made it even more so interesting because it was before he really had a solo career singing with his baritone voice, like One in a Million and stuff like that he did later. And, of course I recognized him from Sly and Family Stone, because he was a guy that said, I'm going to add some bottom, and everybody had like such cool voices in that band. And, they passed it around like a ping pong ball, Sly was really cool about the way he orchestrated that whole band. I was a huge fan of that band. So we thought we were going to do this trio, and then Larry got cold feet at the last minute, and he wanted to do more of a straight and R&B thing, funk thing, and that ended up being Graham Central Station. And I played with that for a second, probably a month, and then I just felt like it was too restraining for me. It was fun to learn how to play funk like that with some of the best guys. I was hanging out in Oakland, California, with Freddie Stone and Larry. Freddie was ripping the guitar out of my hands as a kid back. He goes like this, man. He'd like sit down. He just laid down some wicked rhythm, and so I thank him for that.
Wow.
Right around that time period when I quit doing that, and I thought I was going to do that as a band, Herbie Herbert approached me and he said, I'm going to start a management company. I want to be a manager. And I got another partner I'm going to do, and I have an office that we built upstairs of Studio Instrument Rentals. It was right across the street in San Francisco from Columbia Records. And I was in Studio Instrument Rentals, and so I went up there and we sat down and talked. And he says, I want to manage you, and I'd like to wrap a band around your guitar playing. And so at that time, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I said, great, let's go. And that was the beginning of what ended up being Journey,
Were they called the Golden Gate Rhythm Section at that time? Is that what
we did in the very beginning? We didn't know quite what we were going to do. Herbie had introduced me to all the different individuals that ended up being in the band. And we went in the studio and started creating music. and then, you know, later decided that we're going to try to get a record deal here and become Journey. But, you know, it started with Herbie and I, and, you know, just slowly formed like that.
Well, we've got Neal Schon with us, who is a music legend. And of course, one of the legendary rock bands, one of the best rock bands, greatest rock bands of all time. And they're still together today making music. We'll talk about the new Freedom album in just a minute. But Neal Schon is our guest. And, you know, you go from idolizing great guitarists to being a role model now, where guitarists say, I want to be Neal Schon. How does that feel to you to be in that position where you're a role model influencing all kinds of young up and coming musicians?
You know, I find it so tremendously gratifying. And to see, especially, you know, I've always had a lot of old accounts. A lot of them don't like to talk about me, but there's a few guys out there that, you know, I look up to and you know, been, you know, my favorite cutting edge guitarists for newer generation guitarists such as Steve Vai and Joe Satriani. And they're not afraid to talk about it, but I could really tell that my style rubbed off on a lot of people. A lot of people just want to brush me like under the rug. Like, don't talk about him too much, you know? But the kids are different, you know? I've got a lot of young kids following me, and I see them in the audience, and they're like playing air guitar, and kids are excelling like unbelievably fast these days because they have YouTube to learn by. You know, they can slow things down, where I had a record player, and when I was a kid, to learn how to, you know, when I put on Mahavishnu Orchestra or something, that stuff is so fast. I'm like, how do you learn this? And you'd slow the record player down, you know, and it would drop at a complete octave. And it would sound like, roll, 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 roll. But at least you could pick up the phrasing and kind of somewhat of what they were doing. And so I learned like that. But now, you know, with YouTube and so many different great people teaching on YouTube for kids, they're excelling at a rate that I couldn't even imagine back when I started playing. So to have me even in there as one of their favorite players, they said, you know, they write me and they say, you're different. You know, you play by emotion, not so much. I never really studied. I didn't go to school, you know, for guitar. I didn't go to Berkeley College, you know, music school. I never studied theory. I didn't study anything. I never really studied scales. And so everything was kind of blues based, soul, R&B based guitar player that loves, you know, electric rock guitar. And all my early influences, and love Hendrix, you know. To this day, his albums to me sound as fresh as they did the day they came out. You know, nobody's really surpassed that or had an imagination like he had, just to go, I don't care what everybody else is doing. There's no rules. Prince kind of did the same thing. You know what I mean? All the greatest artists out there, I feel, are not afraid to, you know, express themselves and create. And, you know, it's not about putting blinders up and going, oh, I can only do this. You know, people are going to get scared if I do that. Let's just cater to the media. Let's just do what they want to hear or what we think they want to hear. Nobody has a crystal ball. So, I mean, you know, my advice to younger people when they ask me, I say, follow your heart. Play what's in your soul and what's in your heart. Who moves you? They say, well, who do I listen to? I said, listen to whoever you like, and try to tap into where they're coming from. You know, feel those notes where they're playing, where the phrasing hits and where it lies, you know, within them. And that's kind of how I learned.
And I can tell 50 years later that you still love what you do just as much as you did at the beginning. You watch you and Journey together on stage in a concert, and you're into it. You're having fun, you know, and that's what it's all about, making, you know, something that you can do for your living that you enjoy doing.
Yeah. And, you know, I've always played. I didn't start playing music or guitar because I wanted to be a rock star. I played because I love music, and I love the form of expression that it gave me. You know, I found it so useful throughout my life, you know, to be able to, you know, to me, it's kind of like a psychiatrist within itself. You know, you can express yourself, your emotions, what you're going through. And sometimes, you know, if it's not a great time, you can express those times
through music, and it helps you get through it. And it also will sound really amazing, because then, you know, we're talking about the blues here, and you got the hurt in it. You know, you put some hurt behind it and some meaning behind it, and it becomes real. It's a real thing. And so, yeah, it's a very real thing that I live from night to night when we jump on stage. I love it, man. It's a way of life, and I love performing live. You know, I love making albums too and creating in the studio, but really my true love is performing live in front of a live audience. And actually, when I go out on a wing and I kind of do some daring things that are not the same every night, is what I love the most about it. Because I know that, you know, I'm out on a wing, and instead of being scared of it, you just go with the flow. And I love feeling out the audience and seeing what they're digging. And you can do that while you're playing. You know, I don't look at the guitar that much because I've been playing so long that I kind of either have my eyes closed or I'm looking at the audience, and I'm checking out to see if I'm connecting, you know. And usually if I'm not connecting, it's because it's not being mixed well in the front. And so we just discovered that we needed some help in that area, and we found an excellent young mixer that has fresh ears. Is from England, and he came in, and now he's making us sound like a record out in front every night. Before we're, you know, I don't. You know, everybody wears in-ear monitors, and I'm not really a fan of them, but I use them kind of to protect my hearing, you know, and keep the loudness of the PA and everything away from me, because I've done damage, you know. I've been, you know, playing for a long time. And
you have tinnitus, I guess, which is the ringing in your ear.
Yeah, tinnitus. It's a ringing, constant ringing in your ear, but you know, I learned to live with it, and drink way too much caffeine. That actually makes it ring more. But, you know, I keep the volume really down, pretty low, and so I can hear the PA and I can hear the audience. And, you know, it's really important. And with the prior mixers, I could always tell the guitar was way above the band. And even though I'm the guitar player, the lead guitar player, last thing I want to do is look out in the front row and see somebody cringing like this, and then about 4 songs in, please don't play another solo. Not because they don't like it, it's because it's just so the high end,
right?
And it's so loud that it's not coming out of a band, you know, that's very powerful sounding. So I've always been a fan of mixing where the guitar is sunk in a bit.
Yeah.
My favorite records are when the guitar is like kind of fighting to get out, and you're hearing like thunderous bass and drums. You know, that is your power of your band. So if you turn the guitar above that, you're going to have just that. It's just going to be like, you know, the guitar's in the high end area here, in the mids, and then it's in the vocal area, which is not good. And so anyway, we fixed that problem, and we're sounding like a record every night.
And for the guys and girls who like the guitar sound, Neal's got his own guitar album out, which is called The Universe, I believe. And you do Hey Jude, you do your own version of Purple Rain, and you put your Neal Schon spin on it. And so for those that like to hear that rock and roll guitar, you can just zone out with Neal's album.
Yeah, you know, I've continued. I have many solo albums out there, many of which are in transition right now, because I made a deal with Hypnosis Music, and they took over my catalog. And so some of the smaller labels that I made some of my earlier instrumental records on have folded, and now they're trying to get the licensing back. They're trying to figure out who owns it now. And so it'll eventually, you know, I'm talking with him right now, and they're going to compile like a box set that'll have everything that I've ever done it. And there's quite a lot, actually, that people probably don't even know. And a lot of it is very adventurous, you know, and it's what I do these solo instrumental albums for, is to be more adventurous than in a regular song format.
Well, we love your music. You know, Neal Schon is our guest here on Border Crossings from Journey, with 25 gold and platinum albums, over 19 top 40 singles. I was watching the television today. I was watching Stranger Things on Netflix, and in comes Separate Ways. a whole different sound to it. You know, they did it in their Stranger Things way, but Journey music is everywhere. Everywhere you go, it's, you know, Open Arms, Don't Stop Believing. The tracks go on. It's a soundtrack of my life. And you got the band together again. I mean, it looks like Randy's back with you. I think Dean's back on the drums?
Randy made the new album with us, and played tremendous bass. He's an excellent, you know, musician, bass player, a phenomenal player. And him and I go way back. And Narda Michael Walden, who played drums on the track, on the album. And at that point, they were both going to be our new rhythm section after we got through the ugly lawsuit we were in, and won and got the right to move forward. So it came time to choose some new guys, and I chose them because I just went, I've known these guys forever. It's going to give the band a new, you know, it's going to be a new dance and a new stout, you know, a whole different rhythm vibe to our older songs as well as new stuff. And then, you know, there were some health issues. Randy had a back operation and he didn't quite heal up as fast as he thought he would, so he couldn't go out. And then Narda had a scare with us on one of our last East Coast dates that we played, you know, and I knew there was something going on. And I asked Dean to come out at that point just to help him out because he was having a hard time remembering things. And so there was a scare with him, and you know, I talked with him and said, maybe it's, you know, just in the cards for you to go back and go and be the excellent producer you are. And Dean stays out here with us. And so Dean now is in the band again, which has been phenomenal. He's been excellent. He's been my little brother forever, even though he's like 6'5", whatever he is. And, you know, him and I have traveled through so many different, you know, bands that I've been in, whether it was Hardline to Paul Rogers to Bad English and many different side projects that I've done with him. And so it's him and actually Todd Jensen as the bass player that I made the Hardline record with, that I chose to use in the Paul Rogers band when I was playing the Muddy Waters Blues tour with Paul. And he had a band that he had compiled and put together, and he was getting frustrated with them because they couldn't remember the material. So I said, well, I know two guys that are like sponges. They will soak this up. They'll do their homework. They'll come in and they'll nail this stuff. We won't even have to rehearse, you know, not much except for a sound check. And so he trusted me and he said, okay, bring them. And so I brought Dean and Todd out, and we just found out that we were a really strong trio unit at that point. You know, we played well together. There was a great group. Dean had never played blues before. And Todd had such a great feel in the bass that he pulled him back and he showed him where the bass lied, and Dean just kind of fell right in it, even though it was brand new for him. I mean, that cat was like weaned on Kiss and Rush and Journey, you know? So it was all chops and a lot of power, and he was playing speed metal. You think blues would be the last thing the guy could play, but he was very good at it when playing with Todd. So that's who we have now. We have, you know, it's Arnell, myself, Jonathan, Dean Castronovo, Todd Jensen, and Jason Terlatka.
And you kept the band together. I mean, you've been the backbone of Journey since the beginning. And I believe it was you who found Arnell from the Philippines. We're broadcasting to the Philippines. They're quite proud of Arnell Pineda, who is, you know, taken over the lead role from Steve Perry. But, you know, he hits all the notes and does great. I mean, that was a good find there. That was a good get.
You know, I had scoured the world on YouTube trying to find the new singer for Journey, you know, and it was rough, man. You know, I mean, I didn't, you know, I checked every genre too, because I was having no luck. You know, I checked soul singers, I checked female singers, male singers, rock singers, you know, R&B singers. I looked under every genre, and I did find some excellent R&B singers in England. But the problem that I could tell by not even meeting them and listening to what they had recorded,
is they were kind of singing really soft like this, it was an easy ride,
Right.
which a lot of soul singers do. They don't project a lot because the music is way, way down here. And a lot of it now is just a computer, and it's very monotone. And there's not a lot of dynamics. And Journey is bombastic, like much more so than our records. And so you need to have some real pipes and lungs to be able to carry on top of that and soar. And so I was just not finding anybody. After 2 days, I'd go out for motorcycle rides in between because I just needed to clear my head. And, I came back the latter part of the second day, very kind of frustrated and kind of just discouraged that I was never going to find a guy, where I thought I would find him. And I clicked on one last link that came up, and it was some Survivor song and by a gentleman named Arnel Pineda.
And
And
there it is.
I clicked it on, man, and I probably, if somebody was filming me, I probably looked like the RCA dog. My head turned sideways like this, and like, what am I hearing?
I want more of that. Give me some more of that.
And so, I followed the link that led to a site that a friend of his had created for him. He was in a band called The Zoo at the time that was based in the Philippines, in Manila. It had 40 clips of him playing in a very small club, the Hard Rock in Manila. It looked like, the stage was so tiny. I didn't know if this guy had any stage presence or anything. He was just standing there with the mic, but he was singing his ass off and covering everything in the alphabet. It was like bookend. And he was like a chameleon for everybody. He did a couple Journey songs, but they weren't the first songs I went to. They were actually the last songs I went to because I wanted to hear everything that he was capable of doing. And the more I found out about him, the more intrigued I was with knowing who this gentleman was, And so I heard him do Zeppelin, heard him do Robert Plant, like uncanny, like resemblance, and like just nailing this stuff. I heard him do Steven Tyler. It was another voice, not easy to do. I heard him do Sting. I heard him do Heart. I heard him do all these different people and completely like nailing it to where if I closed my eyes and didn't know what I was listening to, I wouldn't know that it was beyond the band not being completely as good as the originals that were on the original records that he was singing, of the songs he was singing. I would have never known, that it wasn't them. And,
Wow.
And so I was completely like kind of flabbergasted at that point. And I wasn't quite believing my ears. And I'm kind of talking to myself, I'm delirious from looking at this screen so long and listening to so many people. So I went out for, a late night motorcycle ride to clear my head. And I came back and I put it on again just to check it out. And I went, wow, it even sounds better than when I left. So this is real. And I'm not delirious. And so I immediately had called John Kane at that point, Jonathan, and I said, man, I think I found our singer. And he sounded like he was asleep. It was late at night. He was like, really? Well, where's he at? And I said, he's in Manila. And he goes, what? Oh man, you're crazy, how do we know the guy even speaks English? He's singing in English, man, and if he can't speak English, we'll teach him how to,
Yes.
And so I said, here's all the clips, and I sent him everything. And, Jonathan listened, and he wasn't quite sold on it yet. And then I had the task of getting it past our then management. And they kind of laughed at me like I had 25 heads, and said, one manager, the day-to-day guy, walked into the other main guy and said, Irving, Neal's on the phone. He says he found a singer. And listen to this. This guy's crazy. He goes, he says he's in Manila. And they both start hysterically laughing, right? And I go, you guys go ahead and laugh. I said, I did my job. I said, I found the guy. I know my gut instinct that this is the guy. And so now your job is to get him over, okay, from Manila. And I knew from just looking up on the internet that it wasn't an easy task. So, you know, some families that live in the United States and they try to go have family members come over from Manila, it can be a year, it can be, you know, 2 years, it can be very long before the government will allow it. And so they pulled some strings that they managed to get him over in 3 months, which was really, really quick. At that point, he got here and, you know, brought him to rehearsal. We have a rehearsal place up north in Hillsburg, up close to the wine country, where, you know, we rehearse for years and keep all our equipment and stuff like that. We set up for rehearsal, and Arno came in, and we all met him, and his hours were really twisted around, and so
jet lag.
Yeah, he was lagged beyond belief, and so to say the least, he's supposed to be sleeping while he was trying to sing, and the first day was like, you know, pretty rough. He didn't sound, you know, like I thought as good as I thought he would sound. But I said, give him some time. You know, everybody was like, I don't know, you know. And I said, give him some time. I said, he needs to get, you know, acclimated to our time zone. So we came in and said, we did 3 days of rehearsal. Second day he came in, he sounded like 75% better, you know. Third day he came in, sounded 100% better. He sounded like the clips that I heard. Then at that point, I go, I told you, and I had a big smirk on my face, you know, knowing that I was correct. And I said, Jonathan, and I said, let's go in the studio. So John was living here in the Bay Area at the time, and had a house in Nevada, had a really nice studio we worked in all the time, even going back with all our, you know, records that we had done with Perry. And we went in there, and him and I had written 2 songs that were completed with vocals, but they were just rough vocals that we laid down. And we had Arnel go in the studio and had him sing these 2 songs that he'd never heard before. We taught him line after line, you know, here's the lyrics. We give him the lyrics so he could look at, and he'd sing, you know, one line, go to the next line. And by the time we were like halfway through the first song, I remember turning to John, I go, there he is, man. That's the guy. And then at that point, he agreed, you know, and then we moved forward to.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic story. Now, I'm going to ask you the question that you probably get. This is probably the most common question in an interview with Neal Schon from Journey: is Steve Perry coming back? Because he's indicated he misses it and wants to come back. I think you had a quote in 2020. You said, Steve will always be one of my best friends. And so I just want to know where that's at. Is there any chance, any possibility?
You know, I don't think so, really. I'm not saying that him and I couldn't work on something in 10 years down the line if we're still on this earth. You know, I doubt that it wouldn't be a Journey record. Yeah, him and I are speaking. You know, I do think that we remain good friends. Like I felt that we would be. I was really kind of moved by, you know, when I saw him, and I hadn't seen him in a long time from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction that night. And my wife,
2017.
My wife had, you know, we were not talking at that point. We didn't really end up on good notes. And so I didn't know what to expect that night, you know.
Right.
A lot of things were said, and, you know, that you wish you could retract. And when you're pissed off, you say a lot of things.
Yes. Yeah.
And I didn't quite understand what was going down at the time that it went down. And after having years away from it and growing up a bit, you look at it in a different way, and you know, not carrying any grudges, man. It's part of, you know, staying in the positive Zen zone and being able to create. You can't carry weight around with you, you know. If there's things that happen in your life and you don't like what happened, you have to learn to push it out. You know, accept it and accept it as a learning experience. You know, you're not married to it. You don't have to stay with that feeling throughout life, and you move on and you think about the better things, the better times. And so that's exactly what I did. And when my wife was trying to talk me into going, he had a room that was right next to ours, and I go, no, I'm not going in there tonight. I said, you're not talking to me. You always talk to me. We're doing this stuff, and I'm not doing it. And so I said, absolutely not. I can't do this. It's too emotional. Who knows? He's not even going to want to see me, blah, blah, blah. And so she took it upon herself, like she usually does. She's bold. She went over, knocked on the door, and said, excuse me, my husband Neal is out here. He'd like to say hello to Steve. And they opened the door and I walked in, and I was pleasantly surprised. We had a great conversation, embraced and had a great hug, and it made it so much more comfortable when we got on that stage that night to express ourselves. It was a very emotional night, though, for myself, and I think everyone. But really, the greatest thing that came out of that night was not that we got inducted, was that I felt like I got rejuvenated and pulled everybody's minds and hearts back together for a second,
And brought back some memories.
Definitely, and great memories. Like I said, I've moved on, and you think about the finer things that you've accomplished, and wow, we have a lot to be proud of, really.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Grateful of.
Oh, my goodness. Journey is right up there. One of the best rock bands of all time, certainly one of the most prolific and loved bands everywhere on the planet. I don't think there's a place that you haven't played, a stage you haven't been on. And I know you're out on tour with Toto, if I'm not mistaken, for the new album, Freedom. So I do want to talk about the new album. Got to keep BMG happy. So let's talk about the new album.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Have you had a chance to check it out?
I checked out a couple songs. I really like the new stuff. I really, really like the new stuff. The new single, You Got the Best of Me, it sounds like, I hear a different, there's a little bit of some of the old stuff in it. I mean, I can really hear you kind of embodied some of the original Journey stuff.
We've actually on Monday, on the 4th, our 5th single will be coming out off this record. And so the first one was released before we were even finished with the album, and it was Got to Get Back to What We Used to Be, right?
Yes.
And we made the cartoon video that went with that because we didn't know what was going on and who was going to be in the band and this and that. And it was also COVID, and so we couldn't film anything together at that time. We were still in lockdown, and so it's loaded, man. I think I would tell you and tell everyone that hasn't heard this record and only heard one track, it's a deep record and it goes deep. There's 15 tracks on the US version and the European version. In Japan, there's 16 tracks, but I got to tell you, I think it's one of the best albums we've ever made. And it's very, very diverse. You have things that sound like older Journey on it, but then you have a whole new chapter of Journey where there's this heavier funk, jamming stuff that, like I was talking to you about that I almost did with Larry Graham, stuff that, has Prince's influence and Sly and Hendrix. I kind of like, I wasn't afraid to go outside on this album because we already had stuff that sounded like Journey and resembled, some of the songs we have done in the past, not sounded exactly like, but familiar sounding,
Yes.
And so, I took the opportunity because I was co-producing the album with Narda, and it was interesting to make the record like this because, every song we worked on was off the cuff every day, I wasn't with a producer that was kind of like very controlling. Like I've not gone along with a lot of producers before in the past because I had some bad experiences with them. When you walk in the studio and you feel like doing something, whether it's laying down a rhythm track on this, or you want to do a solo on this, or you want to play an acoustic guitar on this, last thing you want to be told is, no, we're not going to do that today. And then continually be told that every day just because they're tripping on themselves, that, they're, in control and want to make you feel like you work for them. It's actually the other way around. And so I had a couple experiences with some bigger guys like that. And I walked out of the studio, and so did John Waite. John Waite didn't come back for, a month. I walked out for a few days and then came back. And then we never ended up finishing the album with the guy. We had to finish up with someone else. But anyway, it was a great experience. I had done the Universe record, my instrumental record with Narda, had a great experience with him, where it was the first time I went in to do a solo album. And I kind of I handed over all the creative power to him. I said, for once, this guy, he's written a lot of great songs for Jeff Beck and many other artists and vocalists in his career. And he's very talented. I want to see what he's made of for real. I've known him for years as a great drummer, but never really quite worked in the studio with him as a producer, songwriter, someone that creates and plays drums and does it all. And so I learned a lot about what he was about doing that solo record. And I was very happy with what I ended up listening to in the end. And it took a lot of, stress off of me, being just a guitarist that's playing on these instrumental tracks, that he wrote the melodies, he wrote everything that was on it. And I had to copy his melodies that he sang, It's the first time for me doing that. And I thought, I think this would be a good experience to do a Journey record like this. And it was. And we kind of chased every idea day to day and didn't spend too much time on any one thing in particular. There's other producers out there that have been a part of very big records. And, I've heard the stories that, it takes 2 years or 3 years to make one album, and you could spend 6 months on one track. And I'm like, I don't think I have the patience to do that. I really don't, because I'm really pretty quick in the studio, and I like to get things done when they're fresh. And so I went for a more liver approach with this album, like what we would sound like and what we used to do when we went in with, like, the first album we ever did with Jonathan, Escape. We went in my rehearsal place over in Oakland that I took over from Larry Graham, and that became our clubhouse. And we rehearsed the hell out of that material, wrote it, then rehearsed it like we're going to walk on stage and play it live and not have any other hits to play, right? So well rehearsed. And, down to, if I'm going to do fills in between the vocals, I'm going to do it in rehearsal. So when we walk in the studio to play, we're going to play live. That's kind of what I did with Narda. We played live. We talked about the arrangement, even though we didn't have the full band there. It was just guitar and drums. We walked in and we laid down everything live with just guitar and drums. Then I'd go on and I'd slam a bass on afterwards, and sometimes play some keyboards just to demo it up a bit before we send it out to everybody, and put rough vocal tracks down. I did a lot of singing rough vocals on this album, came up with a lot of melody. Jonathan did as well, Narda did, Randy Jackson did. We kind of tossed it all around, came up with all the background vocals. I went out and stacked my voice on 5 or 6 different harmony parts, and had a blast doing it, man. It was like, there was no breaks, nobody putting on any breaks. There was no I don't see, I don't want to see this. No blinders. And it was just an open field of, just create. And so, I took advantage of that. And so there's like 4 songs in particular on this album that came on the latter side of the recording that are in that rock and funk vein. And when we did the first one we did was Holding On, which is pretty heavy, for a Journey song. And I worked on the phrasing for the vocal on that for months, and I couldn't come up with something that I felt would translate for Arnell. It sounded like it could have been Sammy Hagar or Rogers, and I kept going at it, and finally we were at a point where I was going, I don't know if this song is going to make it. And I was in love with it, though, because it was, it was going. Some of the songs on this new album, when you listen to it all, you'll know what I'm saying. Some of it goes back to the Infinity era, or it turned into more a pop rock
it was very still like, it was kind of where we were at, which makes sense, before Steve came into the band. Still very musical and kind of like all over the place. You know, there was rock songs, but there was ballads, but there were musical ballads, and it was very orchestral. And, you know, it has that kind of vibe about it where, you know, a lot of people have said this to me that have listened to the whole thing that I've done interviews with so far. They go, this album kind of encompasses everything I've ever heard you do with the band from the first album. And
Yes.
Even though there's no instrumentals, there's definitely some very progressive, aggressive playing on the album, as well as some beautiful playing and some ballads, you know, coming from a little different place.
And I'm shocked to hear you say how producers would take control of the reins for a band like Journey and an artist like you, because you guys have sold close to 100 million records, and you've earned the credibility, you've earned the right to you know, do your own thing. So I'm glad the new album is reflective of you doing what you've wanted to do. It's your album. You've actually said, here's the sound I'm after. And you wrote the songs, you know, many of the songs, you've written the past songs for Journey. How can somebody else produce something that you heard and you created?
Right. You know, this goes back in time with, you know, our manager, Herbie Herbert, the original manager. One of the coolest things, and I think smartest things he ever stuck in our contract with our first record contract with CBS, Columbia, was that they would never get to hear our album until it was done. The A&R guys that were there that think they got the crystal ball, they get these big bucks, you know, as executives that have a crystal ball and say, you need to do more like this, you need to sound more like this. And that's exactly what they'll tell you, whatever the flavor of the month is, you know, right. Or if they find a hit songwriter, whether it's Diane Warren, whoever, they'll make you do 10 of those. You know?
Right.
Because they got to look good for themselves to the label in order to get that big paycheck. And so that was the coolest thing, is that we would be free to go in, and the producers that we chose to work with were just excellent engineers, like Mike Stone, Kevin Elson, who was our, you know, co-producer and engineer. He mixed all our live sound for many years after he came from Leonard Skinner, you know, after we had opened dates for Leonard Skinner way back, and actually started doing really well on their shows before Steve Perry even came into the band. You know, that was the one band we played with that really, their audience got us from the get-go. And we played, man, with Charlie Daniels, Kiss, Cheech and Chong, you name it, Mahavishnu Orchestra. We opened up for everyone. And the Mahavishnu Orchestra audience got us. Kiss audience kind of looked at us like, what is that? You know? And I was kind of looking at Kiss at the time going, what is that, man? I've never seen anything like that. We did, you know, the theater tour with them before, while they were just starting to come up. And we played with everybody, man. And, you know, I was really grateful to the Skinner guys. And that's how we met Kevin Elson. Anyway, they were very uncontrolling. They had their opinions, but they were more dialing in the sound.
Right.
You know, Mike Stone in particular was the echo king. He was English. He knew about using long echoes on vocals and making stuff sound really, really large, like you're in a stadium or, you know, an arena, and for that live sound. So that's something that I went for on this album from the get-go. And Bob Clearmountain ended up mixing. We didn't know who was going to mix the album, but I kind of pre-mixed my own guitar sounds going in because I knew what I wanted it to sound like. And Bob got a hold of it, and he was like, he goes, why did you put all this echo on everything? And I go, sorry, man, I didn't know you were going to mix it. I wanted to make my job in the end easier to make sure I didn't have to be on the phone with whoever was going to mix it, like 24/7 trying to dial them into what I'm hearing. And so he was a bit frustrated with that, but I do think it sounds good, you know. Probably a little bit too much echo for him, but I really wanted to go for that live arena sound, what the band sounds like.
And, you know, something I've grown so accustomed to hearing it sound like when I walk on stage. It's never like in a tiny club unless I went to jam with Buddy Guy in his old club in Chicago, you know, or something where it's just dead,
Right, right.
you know, no echo at all. You know, that's great for blues. It's not necessarily great for rock and roll to me. You know, I like things sounding big and stadium size. And so that's the sound that's on this record.
Now, do you prefer playing a small club or a festival? I mean, you've done it all. You played these 80,000 seat, you know, shows, and you played, you know, shows that are much smaller than that. Do you feel you have a preference when you're playing? Do you like to connect with a smaller crowd, or where do you?
I like it all.
You like it all?
I like it all for different reasons. Like if you know, when BB was still here or when Albert King was still here, and when I would go sit in with them, it would always be in a tight, confined club. And, you know, I love the intimacy of that. It's actually, in a lot of ways, it's more frightening, you know, to have people like right in your face,
right?
You know, because you can read whatever they're thinking, and then you like start thinking, and you know, in the bigger places, it's not as, you know, I don't feel so inhibited. And a lot of people would think it'd be the opposite because you're playing in front of a giant audience. And so wouldn't that be more scary? I go, not really. I know that the music that we wrote for Journey is built for stadiums. So I know that every note we're going to play in here is going to resonate around that giant building. You're going to hear natural echo flying back, even when it's outside in the stadium, from the bleachers, from the cement. It's going to come around from the PA, and it's going to sound as big as it's always sounded on album, what we meant it to sound like. So I feel at home hearing that big giant sound, you know, and I'm enjoying it.
I'm sorry, with 5 generations of fans who've supported you and your music and your sound, and you're out on tour. Is it a world tour that you're on right now? Is it just a U.S. tour?
It isn't a world tour right now. We will go back we're going to go back in and finish up the second leg of this tour, which starts in Las Vegas on the 15th, July 15th, where we're doing 4 orchestral shows. You know, that's going to be interesting too. We have a lot of material. Some material that we did on the first album we did with Arnold has been orchestrated. Some off Infinity record, you know, stuff that we don't play all the time. So that's going to be really fun. And then we head out and we finish up the dates that they've got. We end up, I believe, in Hawaii, which is going to be great to get back. We're going to Puerto Rico, Mexico, Hawaii. Wow. I don't have the whole schedule in front of me, but it'll be up very soon for everyone to see. And please come out and check it out. But then we'll take a break for the holidays. And then we're going out again. We have our first 40 shows booked already with Toto again. It went so well with Toto, you know, it was originally scheduled to be Billy Idol. And then he came down with some kind of a sinus infection that, you know, all I know is I got a call from him and he said, sorry, mate, I'm not going to be able to make it. I'm having issues here. And at that point, you know, I talked to our new agent at CAA and I looked at everybody on their roster and I was like, I don't quite see us with a lot of these people, or if I do, they were already busy and had on other tours. So I suggested Toto, because I've been friends with Steve Lukather for many, many years. We've, you know, always admired each other's playing, each other's bands. We actually played shows together in the 80s. You know, I had seen a poster when Bill Graham was alive here and we're doing Day in the Greens and, you know, over in Oakland Coliseum. I saw an old poster come up from the 80s and it was Journey, Santana, Toto. And I was like, there it is, man. You know, that's a music festival right there. And I always felt, you know, that our audiences would be very compatible. And, you know, Lukather was getting ready to go out and Toto had booked a theater tour and they were still playing theaters in the United States. Well, I knew that
we had switched over from Live Nation to AEG,
Mhm.
and they were wondering what kind of business we were going to do, and so they, were not so certain about the bill until after they saw us like selling out, And so our audience totally embraced Toto. And I think we levitated them in the United States like hugely to a new place where they deserve to be.
Mhm.
And I did them a favor. And I said, Luke, the favor I'm doing, because I'm managing now, right, myself too. And I said, the favor I want back is I know that you guys are huge abroad and in Europe, and we have not spent that much time over there. Or if we did go over there, I felt it was with the wrong bands and it was never properly promoted purposely because management wanted us to stay in the States, and they made a bigger buck there. And
Right.
so we agreed. And so now we're going to do the first 40 shows. And then we're talking about going to Europe with them, possibly Japan. And we're now, Lukather also manages Toto. And so he's talking to his independent promoters over there. And he called me the other day and he said, hey, man, he goes, I'm talking to promoters over there and they're saying they think we can go into stadiums with just two of us. And I said, I don't doubt it, man. I think the journey is much bigger there than we even know right now. Okay. And I'm happy to open up and do exactly the opposite of what we've been doing in the States. And just putting on a great show. And so it's been a great experience. It's been good for both bands. And our audience they absolutely love it. I've never seen as many great reviews from night to night to night. I spent a lot of time working social media because it was our first tour with AEG. And I wanted to respect them because the gentleman I met there that I get along very well with really believed in us in such a manner to go out on a limb when he had many people from the other side. They're not going to sell that. They're only going to be a shed band for the rest of their life. And so Jay just went, I don't believe it. And he trusted in me and in the band. And we went out and we proved ourselves. And so, it's been, I hired professional photographers for the whole band, and it was quite costly. Some guys still don't want to pay for it, but I put pictures of us up on all our sites every night after we played, and I thanked the audience, and I showed them one photographer in particular, Iron Mike, who we're going to keep on board here, that will travel with us next year, gets these long shots. He's like a billy goat, man. He goes all the way top to the nosebleeds, wherever that is, whether it's 1,000, 2,000 steps. He's just an animal. He goes all the way to the top and he captures this giant scope of how massive the crowd really is and how it's really sold out. So naturally, like I thought, people that weren't sure about coming, like in the beginning, we were close to sellouts in the beginning, but about a week into it, we started selling out everywhere. Because, your audience is seeing that. And people that haven't seen you with the new lineup, they're like, oh, I want to check this out, man. It looks like a good time. And I'm missing a good time here. And so it worked, and it snowballed. And so I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing in a management role there, steering a bull.
That's great.
Yeah.
Now, I remember watching you, years ago when I can't say growing up because we're not far from the same age, but I remember watching you in Pine Knob. You guys played Pine Knob in Detroit, where I'm from. And I remember one memory I have, and I don't know if you remember this occasion, but you caused a riot in the city I grew up in. You guys did a concert in Oak Park, Michigan, in a park we had. And they probably didn't realize that they were going to get, 25,000 people show up to a city hall field where you guys played in Oak Park, Michigan. I don't know, it was 70s was the years, but you guys, I don't know if you remember that, but I fondly remember that in my life.
There's nothing about Detroit that I've ever forgotten because to be completely honest and no smoke, Detroit is a place we busted out of, we had continually went back to that market and it, Rock City, capital,
Yes.
and they liked us even when we were playing theaters and
before Perry came in, when he came in, it started really like levitating. We started taking off, and the wings were born and we were like flying. And so when our first album came out, Infinity, and we were still playing theaters in Detroit before we moved into Cobo and we played this gig that you're talking about.
Yep.
I watched it all happen, man. And Detroit was one of the first cities that it happened in. And then to follow was Chicago right afterwards. Chicago, we owned, as well as Detroit. I mean, I recall playing Soldiers Field after Steve came in the band. We opened up for the Rolling Stones, okay? And Bill Graham was promoting the show. And, Herbie accepted, us opening up for the Stones. Those when the Stones were not all that together, they were having a lot of issues and they were kind of, fumbling in and out of the wrong dressing rooms or, the little campers that were set up outside and they'd realize, oh, I'm in the wrong place. And we got 3 like strong encores in front of the Stones and what I recall, and they didn't get one after they played. And so after that, Chicago just went nuts. We ended up playing, we played like an outside show that was down by the piers, right? And they had seated enough seats for about 20,000 people, right? And then it just went out into the streets, okay? That night we played with Cheap Trick. And we love those guys too, and have known them for that long. They're from Chicago. And we had 170,000 people show up, right? They were ready for 20, 25,000 people at the most. We had to escape on the little canal on the side in a boat. We couldn't even get out, And so I remember all those experiences and watching a band grow, and, climb to the magnitude that we still are right now.
Top of the mountain. Neal Schon is our guest from Journey. And, of course, back to you're talking about these old days, like ABX and Riff in Detroit and the Loop in Chicago and all the great radio stations. And what a great time to be a rock band. I mean, rock was really, that was it. Rock was it at the time.
It's here again, though, man.
Yeah. Well, you guys are keeping it alive. I'm amazed at what keeps you going. What's the driving force that keeps you working so hard?
You know what? It's been my life. Journey, it was always my baby from the get-go. When Herbie Herbert, approached me about wrapping a band around my guitar playing, and 3/4 of the way through 72, actually before it started forming. And, I feel like I'm dedicated to it because it's something that I've been in. I've never missed a show, never missed a performance, never not been on a live, never got sick once, knocking on wood,
Right,
after missing any performance ever. And I've been on everything Journey's ever done. So it's almost like it's pride, it's gratitude, it's, faith, it's hope, it's belief in the future, I mean, I just believe in the band and we just proved anybody wrong on our first leg of this last tour that we're toast. You have all these haters out there, naysayers that you don't have Perry, he's the whole band, you're never going to be anything. I got to tell you, man, the clips that I put up from our last tour and the tickets we sold, they all had to go away. There's just nobody left. You still have people say, well, I still miss Steve. And it's like, oh, who doesn't? You know what I mean? We're in 2022 here, and we're climbing up a massive hill like this at a 95-degree angle. And we're heading straight to the stadiums again right now. This many years later, 50 years later for me next year.
Wow. Congratulations on that. I mean, you guys have stayed relevant. You have reinvented yourselves. The new album, Freedom, sounds great. And do you have a favorite era for music? A favorite decade?
My favorite era musically was not necessarily, connected to anything that I've done. But my favorite era was the late 60s.
in the early 70s. I mean, my favorite bands that I saw as a kid that I would go to Fillmore West in San Francisco, or Winterland in San Francisco, or the Family Dog, to see the Dead in Santana, before I knew them. And I was just, 14, 13 years old. I wanted to see Aretha Franklin at Fillmore. I saw, The Who many times. I loved The Who. I loved the Faces, for a party band. They were The Who and the Faces were one of my favorite, like, good time party bands with Rod Stewart and Ron Wood and the rest of those guys in the beginning. I just thought they were phenomenal and, really fun party band, as a kid to go see. And I saw Hendrix, I saw Led Zeppelin, saw Jeff Beck, with Rod Stewart. I saw all the greatest. I saw Cream, I saw Cream in Winterland one night with Paul Butterfield Blues Band, Electric Flag, and a couple other people. It was like 6, 7 outrageous people on bill for $3 a ticket,
Wow. Well, I can tell you're passionate about what you do and you love music. It obviously comes through. And, we could talk all day, I'm sure, and tell some stories about, there must be a memoir coming out. You got to have a tell-all book at some point that you got to write, because I know there's a lot of stories that people wouldn't believe, and you could only tell them yourself.
Well, you know what? I do have a memoir that is somewhat written, but there's been so many new things, groundbreaking things that have happened, both business-wise and within the band, and, new learning experiences and people I've met and interesting stories to tell that are just mind-boggling. To tell you the truth, I probably have a Netflix series. And everybody that I've told a few of the stories to, they were like, dude, you don't have just a movie, you have a Netflix series. I've been told that I have a play, even a childhood story play, which encompasses, where I came from working in the garlic fields with my cousins, trying to make enough money to buy a mini bike to fall off and almost kill myself, and to, borrowing equipment from music stores that I didn't really own. And, because my folks were poor and they didn't have money, so I needed equipment. I had to do things that I wouldn't do now to get them. And I was just, determined that, I always set the goal up here, and I set, it's like throwing darts at a target to me, I set my goal and I just don't stop until I achieve it,
Wow. And you still want Joaquin Phoenix to play you in the movie, the story of Journey? I read that.
I'd be proud for him to play me. I think he'd be excellent. He's such a great actor.
Well, I'm talking to Neal Schon of Journey. Make no mistake about it. When it comes to rock and roll, these guys are right there at the top of the best list. And Neal is the guy responsible for Journey. He put the band together. Now they have a new album, which is called Freedom. And I don't know how many albums you guys have had up. You had a lot. There's been a lot of albums out over the years.
I believe this is our 16th. A lot of people think it's our 15th, but I believe it's the 16th.
16 albums. Wow.
Yeah, and so we had taken so many hiatuses in between all the years, we'd probably have 25, because there's no lack ever in this band of material or creativity. I mean, it's like a water faucet for myself and Jonathan and the guys. It's like I never have a date where I feel like I'm in a drought, like it's all dried up and I have no ideas. This is my new cassette recorder, which is an iPhone. And I have thousands and thousands of songs that are rough sketches of songs that I lay in here every day. I could write them on keyboards and make a loop. I can write them on guitar. Down in my studio, I don't spend the time making real demos because I feel like you're choking and cutting the baby's legs off, too early. A lot of people make these demos that sound like albums. And by the time you get in the studio, you have it so implanted in your head that that's what it should sound like, that the realness of being there in the moment is gone, because you're chasing something that you did that's not necessarily the best thing that you could have done. So I don't like to get too close or fall in love with too many immediate things that are rough sketches. To me, they should just be rough sketches, and it's how I get a lot of work done and get far, far ahead of the game.
Where's the most unusual place you ever got inspiration for a song that you can recall?
Oh, wow. Unusual place. Well, you know, I don't know if it was so unusual as far as a landmark, but where I get a lot of inspiration from was driving. I like driving motorcycles and cars, and I found it to be tremendous, like, inspiration. Yeah, driving, you know, I get a lot of ideas, and a lot of times I would be working on something, and my motorcycles, I'd have bigger Harley Davidsons that were baggers that had a stereo in it. And I felt there was like nothing quite like going out for a long ride, going out to the coast and really listening to what I was working on, not listening to radio, but listening to ideas that I was forming in a rough state, and just, it would kind of sink in because I wasn't sitting in a studio or playing an instrument. And whatever stuck with me after that ride, I knew was kind of the foundation of what was meant to be. And that's just kind of the way, I work.
Well, that's fantastic. And I know, you've given us so much of your time, and you've been so gracious and answered everything. And I really appreciate that. It is an honor for me to have you on the show. And we're going to be able to turn this into a week's worth of shows because we had such a great conversation. And
let's go, man. Let's go. I heard it's amazing. I read, my publicist sent me, how large you guys, and where it goes out everywhere. And I go, I'm going to give him as much time as he wants, if he's interested.
Well, thank you.
And talking to me, and I'll gladly do it again. You were so easy to do an interview with. And
thank you. Thank you, Neal. And when you come to the DC area, you guys play, I'd like to get you in the studio, that would be in person, even better if you could spare some time the next time you're in DC. And before I let you go, I wanted to ask if there's something you want to say to the troops, because I know they're tuned in and, they've been big supporters of Journey. You guys have been big supporters of the troops. And so this is an opportunity for you to speak directly to the...
We've been supporting the troops for such a long time. And, I'm so grateful to them for protecting us and always keeping us out of harm's way. Truly grateful. They put their own life on the line, and their families is, sacrifice so much. And, I've grown accustomed to playing the Star Spangled Banner, and it's always dedicated to them.
And you just played the Star Spangled Banner at the NBA Finals, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I did. I got asked to do, the first big time since I've been managing myself too. I got asked to do the Raiders game, and that was televised. And that was like incredible, man. The roar from the audience was something like I've never heard before. For me, instrumentally playing that, I didn't know what to expect, and it was just incredible. And then just did the Warriors, they asked me to come and do that. Got to do the opening game in San Francisco at the Chase Center. And it was wild, man. It was different than being on a football field. I can tell you that because these guys are huge. I was standing in the middle of the court, and both teams were on both sides, and the balls, they were flying down in front of me. But I was waiting for them to go, okay, you got 2 seconds before you're on live. I thought I was going to get taken out for real, man. The balls were flying. These guys were falling all over the place. It was a wild experience. I was a little more nervous for the Warriors game because of that. I was a little unsettled before we started. And then I had a harder time hearing myself in that place than I did the big stadium where they had a massive, AEG's got a massive PA in there. And it sounds just incredible. So, I've been asked to do more of that. I'm going to definitely do more of that. And, we were planning something very cool in DC that unfortunately had to be, moved because one of our guys getting COVID, and is now being pushed to, it's the beginning of next year, 23. We're going to go back and do those makeup dates. So hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah, we'll be here waiting for you. Please do come in and visit us, and you know, in DC when you're here, and hopefully you get to play in the Philippines. I know that, you know, if you haven't already done so with Arnell, they're gonna go crazy there too.
We did play in the Philippines twice since Arnell's been in the band, and it was a pretty incredible experience. I think just due to, you know, the COVID compliance in which we're having to, you know, really take seriously. Otherwise, you don't get past a couple days out there, man. It's challenging to be on tour. We have like over 50 guys in our road crew. Some go down, we had to replace them. Tougher when somebody in the band goes down, you know. You can't replace them, and
No.
we have to bail, and we have to all come home. It's very expensive. You keep everybody, you know, on pay until everybody is well again. And so, you know, we kind of stay in the bubble. It's still out there, man. And, you know, I don't know. We get the booster shots. We've had 4 shots. We're going to get a 5th one. You know, I still wear the mask. My wife and I wear the mask. We like believe in it. And, you know, so far, so good. We've not gone.
Yes. Knock on wood for that too. Knock on wood for that too. Everybody needs to get vaccinated. You know, I mean, you may get COVID, but at least you'll still be here to talk about it after you pass the symptoms.
Exactly. It's not the flu. Definitely not.
No, but thank you, Neal Schon, for being on the show, for sharing the memories, for sharing your time so generously. The new album is called Freedom. It's now available on Spotify, iTunes, everywhere you can get an album, get some music. Definitely pick up the album. I have so many questions I wanted to ask that we didn't get to, so I'm looking forward to finishing this in DC when you come back near the end of this year, beginning of next year. Neal Schon, thank you for giving us this honor with your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Neal Schon from Journey. The album is Freedom. I'm Larry London, and you are watching VOA Television.